Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Dear students, good morning. I am Dr. Dinesh Kumar, Principal Scientist, Division of Agronomy, ICAR, Indian Agriculture Research Institute, Pusa Campus, New Delhi. It is 11th lecture of the course Agronomy of Oilseed, Fiber and Sugar Crop. The topic of this lecture is Nutrient, Water and Weed Management in Groundnut Crop. So, learning objective of this lecture are to know the nutrient and water management practices in groundnut. So, in this case, we will see what are the important nutrients, what are the major roles of these nutrients in groundnut crop, and what are the deficiency symptoms. And afterwards, you will see the management of nutrients for better productivity of groundnut. And similarly, you will also learn about the water management practices in groundnut, and then to describe the weeds and weed management options in groundnut. So, in this case, you will learn the species of weeds, whether grassy weeds or broad-leaved weeds or sedges, and what are the morphological features of these weeds and control measures of weeds. Before going into the details of this lecture, let us learn some difficult words like adjuvant. Any substance in an herbicide formulation or added to the spray tank to modify herbicidal activity or application characteristics. So, in general, these adjuvants help in improving the efficiency of the herbicide materials. Allelopathy, the adverse effect on the growth of plants or microorganism caused by the action of chemicals produced by other living or decaying plants. So, this allelopathy is quite commonly observed in case of weeds. Sometimes weeds can have adverse effect on the crop by releasing certain chemicals or organic compounds from their roots. And similarly, sometimes the crop plants can also have adverse effects on weeds by releasing chemicals or root exudates. Similarly, lot of interactions happens between different plants, crops and weeds. Antagonism, an interaction of two or more chemicals such that the effect when combined is less than the predicted effect based on the activity of each chemical applied separately. So, in fact, antagonism is kind of opposite or negative interaction. It happens with case of phosphorus and zinc in soil. So, if you have more phosphorus in the soil or addition through fertilizer, then the zinc availability will decrease. Similarly, if you increase the zinc application, it can reduce the phosphorus availability. So, this is a classical example of antagonism in nutrients. Basin irrigation, irrigation by flooding areas of level land surrounded by dikes. Dikes are also called as bunds. Border irrigation, irrigation by flooding strips of land rectangular in shape and cross-leveled, bordered by dikes or bunds. Water is applied at a rate sufficient to move it down the strip in a uniform sheet. Then contact herbicide, an herbicide that causes injury to only the plant tissue to which it is applied, or a herbicide that is not appreciably translocated within the plant system. So, this contact herbicide is just opposite of translocated herbicide. Translocated herbicide are to be absorbed by the plants, maybe through leaves, maybe through roots, and then they act in the plant system by translocating from one place to another place. But contact herbicide do not move much in the plant. They will kill the plant part, only the plant part to which they come in contact. Therefore, the name contact herbicide. Critical value, the nutrient tissue or soil concentration falling just between deficiency and sufficiency for a given crop, that is called as critical value. crop nutrient uptake, the total amount of nutrients per unit area removed or taken by crop to produce both straw and grain. So, whatever nutrients are absorbed and accumulated in the plant system are called as crop nutrient uptake. This depends upon biomass and the concentration of nutrient in the plant tissues. If you have more concentration and more biomass, then you can have more nutrient uptake. Macronutrient, a chemical element necessary in relatively large amounts for the growth of plants. These elements consist of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, calcium, magnesium, potassium, phosphorus, sulfur and nitrogen, etc. So, here I can just refresh your memory that nutrients are 18 in number, they are needed for plant growth, 17 in number, they are needed for plant growth, and without these nutrients plant cannot complete their life cycle. So, in this case 3 elements are considered as framework elements. These are carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and then comes nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. They are called as primary nutrients, and then calcium, magnesium, sulfur. They are secondary nutrients. So, these primary and secondary nutrients together make up your macronutrients. Then comes micronutrients, which are 8 in number. So, for example, zinc, iron, manganese, copper, boron, nickel, etc. These are micronutrients. So, in total they are 17 in number. Now, micronutrients are a chemical element necessary only in extremely small amounts for growth of plants. These elements consist of boron, chlorine, copper, iron, manganese, molybdenum and zinc. Mulch, any material such as straw, sawdust, leaves, plastic film, loose soil, etc. that is spread on the surface of the soil to protect the soil from the effects of raindrop, soil crusting, freezing and evaporation, or to control the weeds. So, these mulching are particularly used in areas where soils are susceptible to erosion or there is problem of water conservation. So, in this case mulches can be used to conserve the water because they reduces evaporation. They also modify or moderate the soil temperature. So, overall mulching helps in having better plant growth. Now, we come to the nutrient management part. So, it aims in supplying nutrients through different sources to in right amount, optimum rate, appropriate time and by correct method so as it gets maximum efficiency of nutrient use. Nutrient management also aims at building or improving the soil fertility and health so as to grow crops successfully. So, what happens when we grow the crops, 1 crop, 2 crop or 3 crops in rotations or sequences or sometimes in intercropping? They remove a great amount of nutrients from the soil, and whatever is removed from the soil, that has to be returned back to the soil if we want to maintain the fertility of the soil. But what happens, most of the time we remove more nutrients through the crops and add less nutrient to the soil. Therefore, soil fertility declines, and also there may be some erosion problem that also leads to reduction in soil fertility. If our fertility is reduced, that means it cannot support a good growth, optimum growth of the crop. Then what can be done? In that case, we have to add the nutrients to the soil. These nutrients can be added to the soil through different sources, and it is better to go for integrated nutrient management where we involve organic manures, for example, farmyard manure, vermicompost, compost, even crop residues can be added, green manuring can be practiced. So, this is one option, addition of green manure. Second, we can go for biofertilizers. They are also good. Sometimes they supply nitrogen by fixation and they also solubilize phosphorus. So, variety of biofertilizers are available. Similarly, we can go for other options of nutrient addition in the soil. And it is also important to correct the soil pH. Many times soil pH also hinders the availability of the nutrient, and it is also necessary to preserve the soil. We should prevent our soil from erosion so that nutrients can also be conserved. What happens? This soil erosion removes organic matter from the top layer, and it also removes lot of microorganisms from the soil, and this organic matter contains lot of nutrients, and microbes are used for cycling of nutrients in the soil. So therefore, we need to preserve our soil, prevent the soil erosion. So overall, you can see in case of nutrient management, you need to supply nutrients to compensate for the losses that have occurred due to crop uptake or soil erosion. So that is actually called as nutrient management, and application of nutrients should be based upon soil testing. Soil testing is available anywhere, one can get soil tested, and according to the recommendation of the soil test, we should apply nutrients to the soil. Now, other important aim of nutrient management is to match the nutrient supply to the need of the crop. What happens? Our plant grows in a sigmoid curve fashion. Sigmoid curve means initially the growth of the plant or crops is slow, then it increases at a faster rate, and after that the increase is very slow. This is sigmoid kind of growth curve. So we should supply the nutrient in such a way that maximum availability of the nutrients is made in the soil on that stage of plant where it requires it more. So there should be minimum losses of nutrients from the soil plant system, and thus nutrients should be recycled as far as possible. So we must ensure that the losses of the nutrients from soil are reduced. For example, leaching losses can occur, volatilization losses of nitrogen can occur. So we must prevent these kind of losses of the applied nutrients as well as native nutrients. Now we start with the deficiency symptoms of different nutrients in groundnut crop. So first of all, we start with nitrogen deficiency. But before that, we need to understand the role of nitrogen in plant. So nitrogen is building block of plants. It makes proteins. So proteins cannot be made without nitrogen, and it is also part of chlorophyll molecule. And you know chlorophyll is very necessary for photosynthesis. So there will not be any chlorophyll if nitrogen is not there. And also it is part of several enzymes, RNA, DNA. So many molecules, many important molecules contain nitrogen in the plant. So it has really very important role. But sometimes there may be deficiency in crops, and here also, although groundnut is a leguminous crop, but still it can suffer from nitrogen deficiency. So in that case also we need some starter dose. So here what could be the deficiency symptom of nitrogen? You can see it is stunted growth, stem is thin, and stem can be elongated, entire plant light green. You can see the plant can become light green. Here on the left side you can see these leaves are almost yellow. You can see chlorosis has happened. So these kind of symptoms are there, and the stem may turn reddish in appearance. And of course, the nitrogen is mobile in the plant system. Mobile in the plant system, that means the deficiency symptoms will come on lower leaves or lower part of the plant, and that is chlorosis or yellowing of the leaves. So what are the soil conditions favoring nitrogen deficiency? Under what conditions one can experience deficiency of nitrogen? So soil low in organic matter, light texture soils or particularly sandy soils are light texture, and these sandy soils are in these sandy soils you can have more leaching losses of nitrogen in the form of nitrate, particularly when you apply more water or high rainfall is there. So leaching of nitrate can occur under those conditions. Secondly, reduction of organic matter in the soil will also lead to the nitrogen deficiency, because organic matter contains lot of nitrogen, and this nitrogen during the cropping season is released from this organic matter. Therefore, if organic matter is low, that means supply of nitrogen will also be low. Soil exhausted by intensive cropping. So, if you take many cereal crops or heavy nutrient feeder crops, then there may be lot of removal of nutrients or nitrogen from the soil, and your plants or crop may suffer from nitrogen deficiency. Also, in acid soils having pH less than 6 and alkaline soils having pH more than 8, under these conditions also nitrogen deficiency will be prevalent. Now, after nitrogen, let us see the deficiency symptoms of phosphorus, and phosphorus plays very important role in plant growth and development. It helps in the root formation and also in the flowering of the plant, and it has a special role in the leguminous plants, and the requirement of phosphorus is quite good for leguminous crop compared to the nitrogen, and it is also part of adenosine triphosphate, ATP, ADP, etc. in the plant system. And also it is part of certain proteins in the plant. Therefore, it is quite essential nutrient. So, now you are seeing the phosphorus deficiency symptoms here in the leaves of groundnut, and you can see mostly these symptoms first come on the older leaves. What happens? Purpling of the leaf margins and stunted growth, but more dark green color of the leaves. First occurs on older leaves and later spread to other leaves from the bottom. So, because it is a mobile nutrient and it can easily move from lower parts or lower leaves of the plants to the upper leaves or upper part. Therefore, deficiency will be there on the lower leaves, and this will have purple color on the leaves. The older leaves and petiole and veins with purple suffused pigmentation without orange or brown lesions. The older leaves may also become orange, yellow, then brittle, and finally shed. Shedding of leaves can also occur. Now, what are the soil conditions under which we can experience the sulfur deficiency? This is phosphorus deficiency. This is phosphorus deficiency. Soil with less than 10 ppm available P are considered low for groundnut. So, available phosphorus is very, very important, and if the level is 10 ppm, it is critical level, or you can convert it into kilogram per hectare. Roughly it will be 20 kilogram per hectare available phosphorus, which may be considered as low for groundnut. The mobility of phosphorus is highest at pH 6 and 6.5. So, here the availability of phosphorus is quite high, because in this pH it is mostly in the H2PO4 form, H2PO4 power minus 1. That is the most preferred form of phosphorus by the plant. As you increase the pH towards 7 or 7.2, then it will become HPO4 power minus 2. So, at pH 7.2, these H2PO4 and HPO4 forms of the phosphorus are in almost equal proportion or equal amount. So, we need to keep pH of the soil somewhere around 6.5 to 7 to get maximum availability of the phosphorus. As you increase the pH of the soil, then the availability will decrease. Particularly, this phosphorus will get precipitated with calcium. It will make tricalcium phosphate, and then it can make octacalcium phosphate or ultimately apatite. So, this is chemical fixation of phosphorus at high pH. Similarly, at low pH also phosphorus can be fixed with certain micronutrients like iron. So, phosphorus is always a limiting factor in calcareous soils. So, similarly, in calcareous soils we have lot of calcium, and the phosphorus availability is affected there also. Now, after phosphorus, this potassium deficiency. Potassium is very, very important for plant growth. It is involved in the activities of stomata, that is stomata closing and opening, and it makes the salt balance in the plant system. So, also involved in the transport of sugars, and variety of functions are performed by potassium in the plants. So, any deficiency of potassium will result in decreased growth and yield of the crop. And you can see the symptoms of potassium deficiency in groundnut. You can see the marginal firing and tip burning. Here you can see the tips are burnt, looking like burnt tips, and you can also see burning on the margins of the leaves. See on the left side also, these are typical deficiency symptoms of potassium in groundnut crop. So, potassium deficiency first appear on old leaves. Old leaves, that means it is a mobile nutrient and it can be easily translocated from lower leaves to the upper leaves or upper part of the plant. So, therefore, deficiency like marginal firing, tip burning, they are going to happen on the lower leaves. Yellowing of leaves starts from the tips or margins of leaves extending towards center of leaf base. Drying up of leaf margin with hollow yellowed margin and necrotic symptoms and reddish coloration of tip of branches. So, you can see whatever burning or firing you are seeing on the leaves, they have become necrotic. Necrotic means they have died. Necrosis means death of the tissues. The stem becomes red accompanied by excess storage of starch and leaves become light green in case of potassium deficiency. Let us check the soil conditions that favor potassium deficiency. This is K. Soils formed from parent material low in potassium, means the basic material, the initial material from which soils were formed. If that material is deficient or that material was deficient, then definitely soil formed from such material will be deficient. For example, if your milk is having low fat, your curd will also have the low fat. So, therefore, if fundamentally the parent material was low, then soil formed from that parent material will also be low in potassium. Light textured soils where potassium has been leached by heavy rainfall or excessive irrigation, particularly in light textured soils or sandy soils where macropores are large in number and the cation exchange capacity of the soil is low. So, under those conditions, the soil cannot hold sufficient cations and potassium is a cation. So, even in that case, leaching can occur, particularly if rainfall is high or one is going for excess irrigation. Soils low in organic matter, soils with wide sodium-potassium ratio, magnesium-potassium ratio, calcium-potassium ratio, or in acid soils having pH less than 6, we can have potassium deficiency. Now, after potassium, let us see magnesium deficiency. So, you can go see this is discoloration or this is kind of whitening or loss of chlorophyll. You can see loss of chlorophyll on the leaves. So, it is a mobile nutrient, this magnesium, and deficiency symptom will come on the older leaves. Mobile being means it can be transported or translocated from lower parts of the plant to the upper parts of plant. Therefore, deficiency first observed on older leaves and severity increases with time if deficiency persists. Intervenal chlorosis, this is a typical symptom of magnesium deficiency with the dark green veins. That means the veins are green, but intervenal area has become chlorotic. Initially, the chlorosis begins at the leaf margins and then proceeds towards the mid vein. So, this is how deficiency proceeds for magnesium, and this chlorosis happens because this magnesium is the part of chlorophyll molecule. There will not be formation of chlorophyll molecule if magnesium is not there, because it is the structural part. So, one atom of magnesium is always there in the chlorophyll. Severely deficiency case, chlorotic older leaves may develop necrotic lesions, means death of the tissues. In the intervenal tissues, the deficient leaves shed prematurely, they can fall from the plant. And what will happen ultimately? The rate of photosynthesis will decrease. That means dry matter production will be low, and which ultimately reflect in reduced plant growth. Now, what are the soil conditions that favor magnesium deficiency? that favor magnesium deficiency. Soils formed from parent material low in magnesium, like potassium. If your parent material was poor in magnesium, soil formed from such material will also be low in magnesium. So, light textured soils where magnesium has been leached by heavy rainfall or excess irrigation, particularly in coastal areas of India and also in Assam, Odisha. In these areas, if there is heavy rainfall, then this magnesium along with calcium can leach down and the acid soils are formed. So, therefore, this magnesium deficiency is quite common in acid soils, particularly in high rainfall areas. Soils low in organic matter will also be deficient in magnesium, and soils with wide and sodium is to potassium ratio, magnesium is to potassium ratio, and calcium is to potassium ratio. Acid soils having pH less than 6. So, under these conditions we can have deficiency of magnesium. Now, after magnesium, let us see the sulfur deficiency. So, sulfur is very crucial for plant growth, particularly in oilseed crop, and groundnut is a oilseed crop. Its requirement for sulfur is quite high compared to other kind of crops. So, therefore, we need to understand the role of sulfur. Sulfur can be part of some kind of proteins, necessarily part of some proteins, and it is part of essential amino acid methionine, cysteine and cysteine. So, therefore, it is very essential nutrient for plant growth, and so far also it is involved in the synthesis of chlorophyll. If there is sulfur deficiency, that means the synthesis of chlorophyll itself will be poor. That means ultimately your photosynthesis rate will decline. And coming to the deficiency, you can see the deficiency of sulfur comes on the younger leaves, because it is immobile in plant. It cannot move from lower parts of the plant to the upper parts of the plant. But the deficiency symptoms are quite similar as in case of nitrogen. There is only one difference between nitrogen and sulfur deficiency, that sulfur deficiency, that is uniform chlorosis, happens in the younger leaves, and nitrogen deficiency happens in the lower leaves. So, what happens in sulfur deficiency? You can have stunted plants, reduced branching. So, branching is very critical in groundnut. If your branching is not there, then you will have less flowering and less fruiting. Delayed in maturity, your maturity will become late. Immobile in plant, therefore, deficiency is first observed on the upper leaves or younger leaves. Initially, the whole plant appears light green and younger leaves become pale green or yellow, means chlorophyll is lost. The uniform chlorosis develops over entire leaf, covering both veins and interveinal tissues. Now, what are the soil conditions that favor sulfur deficiency? So, soils having low organic matter, light textured sandy soils that have been leached by heavy rainfall or excessive irrigation. So, as I have already told you that sulfur can be part of some proteins. So, if your organic matter is missing or organic matter is less, that means proteins will be less in the soil, and conversion of proteins into sulfur will be less. So, therefore, sulfur deficiency may occur due to deficiency of organic matter. And what happens? Sulfur can be lost by leaching also in high rainfall areas, and sulphate has negative charge and which can be easily leached down to the groundwater. Soils exhausted by intensive cropping. Soils derived from parent material which is low in sulfur, and acid soils having pH less than 6. Under these conditions, we can have sulfur deficiency. So, intensive cropping, what happens? Sometimes we take cereal system, say rice, wheat. Even in some areas, people can take 3 crops of rice, and which is heavy feeder of nutrients. It takes up lot of nutrients from the soil. So, these intensive cropping results in reduced level of sulfur also. Now, after sulfur, see the iron deficiency. So, you are seeing the chlorosis, there is yellowing of the leaves, and you can see some white color. white color of the leaves also. So, what happens in iron deficiency? First there will be chlorosis or yellowing of the leaves. After that these leaves can become white and then they can turn brown and dry and there can be death of the leaves. So, this can become very severe in groundnut. So, what happens? Poor growth, smaller leaves, immobile nutrient. So, if it is immobile nutrient, that means the deficiency symptom will come on the younger leaves. Lower leaves will remain green and younger leaves will become yellow or chlorotic. A pale yellow chlorosis develops in intervenal tissues while veins remain green and prominent. So, for a student this is necessary to understand the difference in iron deficiency and sulfur deficiency. In both the cases leaves become yellow initially, but in case of sulfur it is uniform yellowing. The veins are yellow, the intervenal parts are yellow, but in iron deficiency veins remain green and intervenal area can become chlorotic. So, while veins remain green here, this chlorosis will extend the full length of the leaves. As chlorosis advances, veins also become chlorotic and entire leaf may appear pale yellow only in case of extreme deficiency. In the later stages, leaves turn almost white and may become necrotic, means it must have died. Now, what are the soil conditions that are responsible for iron deficiency? Sandy soils having low total iron means basically the iron content was less. So, definitely if total iron is less, proportionately the available iron will also be less. Alkaline and calcareous soils with low iron solubility. So, definitely under alkaline conditions the solubility of iron is less. However, under acidic conditions iron availability is high. Peat and muck soils where organic matter ties up with iron and reduces its availability in soil solution. Acid soils with excess soluble zinc, manganese, copper or nickel. So, it can get fixed with zinc, manganese and copper or nickel under acid soils that can hinder the uptake of iron despite high availability. And of course, alkaline soils having pH more than 7.5, you can have iron deficiency. Now, next in the series is zinc deficiency. So, you can see again here also there is chlorosis and most of the time it occurs on the middle leaves or leaves which have just matured. So, deficiency symptoms: plants are stunted, size of internodes is reduced, means the height of the plant will also reduce and young leaves become small and partly mobile in plant. So, deficiency first appear on recently matured leaves, while older leaves remain usually green and healthy. The chlorosis develop in intervenal areas of recently matured young leaves. In prolonged deficient conditions, leaves may become reddish brown and fall off. So, this is very important micronutrient in India, and roughly about 50% soils in India are deficient in zinc, and this is very necessarily required for synthesis of hormone indole acetic acid. Now, what are the soil conditions that favor zinc deficiency? Leached sandy soils where zinc is low, alkaline and calcareous soils, here you will have zinc deficiency where zinc's availability is depressed. Recently leveled soils where subsoil is exposed to cultivation. Available zinc in surface soil is often double that of subsoil. Soils in which high rates of phosphorus fertilizer are applied, which can hamper zinc uptake. As I have already told you that phosphorus and zinc may have antagonism effect under certain conditions. If you increase application of one at high rate, it will reduce the availability of the other. Also, in acid soils less than pH less than 5, one can have zinc deficiency. Similarly, alkaline soils having pH more than 7.5, the zinc deficiency can be observed. Now, you have seen the deficiency symptoms and you have seen the importance of these nutrients in plant growth. Now, how to supply these nutrients? So, let us see how to manage these nutrients so that these deficiency symptoms may not appear. So, definitely groundnut is a heavy feeder of soil nutrients, crop yielding 1.9 tons per hectare, that is about 1900 kilogram per hectare, removes 170 kilogram nitrogen, 30 kilogram phosphorus, 100 kilogram K2O, 39 kilogram calcium, 15 kilogram sulfur and 20 kilogram magnesium, besides several micronutrients. So, you can see about 2 tons of crop of this groundnut is removing very large quantity of nutrients, and if these nutrients are not returned back to the soil, soil will become very poor in fertility. So, therefore, we need to add these nutrients from external sources. Being a legume crop, it needs more phosphorus, sulfur and calcium for proper shell formation and filling. So, shell is the outer cover of the pod. Of course, part of nitrogen it can fix for its requirement. For realizing the potential yield and sustaining the soil fertility, integrated nutrient management practices involving microbial, organic and inorganic fertilizer should be adopted. So, that is a sustainable way to supply nutrients, that is integrated nutrient management. For seed inoculation with bradyrhizobium, it is also a kind of rhizobium, use the efficient culture. So, we need to adopt the integrated approach including application of biofertilizer, and since it is a leguminous crop, we need to inoculate it with the rhizobium, or here it is bradyrhizobium. And also well decomposed farmyard manure or compost at the rate of 5 to 10 per hectare should be applied before sowing of the crop. Farmyard application, besides supplying nutrients, reduces soil crusting, compaction and enhances water holding capacity under rain-fed conditions. So, these kind of organic manures have multiple benefits. Surely they will supply the nutrients, but besides that, these manures also improve the physical condition of the soil, the biological condition of the soil. Biological condition means they will improve the microbial activity in the soil. Physical improvement means they will improve the water holding capacity. These organic manure improve the soil structure, and improvement in soil structure will lead to more storage of water by the soil. Groundnut needs a starter dose of 15 to 25 kg nitrogen per hectare. So, this is very low dose for groundnut because it is a leguminous plant. It has got root nodules which got nitrogen fixed in them by bradyrhizobium. But seed inoculation with bradyrhizobium in combination with 25 kg nitrogen per hectare is therefore recommended. So, this is the recommendation of nitrogen for groundnut. Apart from soil application, a foliar application of 2% urea solution, 0.5% ferrous sulfate at 30 and 75 days after sowing has been useful. Nitrogen is fine, but ferrous sulfate can be sprayed only when you think that the iron deficiency is there. Then only we should use ferrous sulfate. In general, 200 to 500 gram of carrier based bradyrhizobium inoculum is recommended per hectare. Now, you are going to treat the seed with the bradyrhizobium. So, the quantity of culture is 200 to 500 gram, and then a solution of 5% jaggery or gur or sugar is prepared in water for treating 100 kg kernel of groundnut. 1 liter solution is necessary, and this solution should be cooled down. So, add the required quantity of the culture in cold solution and pour on seeds, spread evenly on cement floor or polythene sheet. So, now you are treating the seed with the bradyrhizobium culture. Then you smear the slurry, pouring on kernels, or you can rub it by your hands. Treated seeds are dried in the shade to avoid mortality of bradyrhizobium. In the case of seed treatment with fungicide, change the method of application of culture, because what happens if you apply fungicide after treatment with biofertilizer, then it can kill the biofertilizer. Therefore, we need to be very, very careful. First option could be apply this into the furrow fungicide after mixing it with 100 liters of water, or mix it with decomposed compost of 1000 kg and apply compost in seed furrow. So, this is how, this is alternative way, but other way could be to adopt FIR. F for F is for fungicide, I for insecticide and R for rhizobium. Here it can be FIB, that is bradyrhizobium. So, here one can go for seed treatment with fungicide first, and after 4 to 8 hours you can go for treatment of bradyrhizobium. Application of phosphorus and other nutrients should be based on the soil test. In the absence of a test, apply 40 to 50 kg phosphorus under rain-fed condition and 50 to 60 kg under irrigated condition. So, you need more phosphorus under irrigated condition than in rain-fed condition. For phosphorus application, single superphosphate is the best source because it also supplies calcium. It contains about 19.5% calcium and sulfur also, 12.5% sulfur along with phosphorus. It has 16% P2O5. K application should be based on the soil test. In soils where available potassium, 1 molar ammonium acetate extract is more than 150 kg per hectare, the response to applied K is non-significant. Means if your available K in soil is more than 150 kg per hectare, then you need not to apply any potassic fertilizer. A dose of 40 kg K2O under rain-fed conditions and 60 kg K2O per hectare under irrigated condition is recommended depending on available K2O status. It is good to apply potassium or phosphorus based upon soil test, but in case if the information is not available, we can go for such kind of recommendation, and these recommendations are for Andhra Pradesh 20 kg nitrogen per hectare, 40 kg phosphorus, 20 kg potassium, and here gypsum is being used as a source of sulfur and calcium both. And Chhattisgarh 20 40 20, in Gujarat 12.5 40 40, Karnataka 15 30 25, Maharashtra 20 40, Madhya Pradesh 20 40 20. So, these are the recommendation of the nitrogen P2O5 and K2O kg per hectare in these states. Other states like Odisha, you can have 10, 16, 15 kg and P2O5 and K2O, Punjab 15 40 25, Rajasthan 20 60 60, Tamil Nadu 10 20 40 and Uttar Pradesh 15 30 45. And you need to apply all these fertilizer basally at the time of sowing. You need not to go for top dressing of any of these fertilizer. All should be applied at the time of sowing and preferably in furrows little away from the seed. Fertilizer recommended for Uttar Pradesh is 15 kg nitrogen per hectare, 30 kg P2O5 per hectare and 45 kg K2O per hectare. So, by now you have seen the nutrient management practices in groundnut crop, and also you have seen the other aspect related to nutrient management in case of groundnut crop. Now, let us see about the water management. Groundnut is predominantly a rain-fed crop, and with only 20% of its total acreage is under irrigation. Rain-fed means it is grown based upon the rainfall only. There is no provision of artificial irrigation by tube well, canal or any other source. This irrigated area mainly pertains to Rabi and summer season crops. As you know, in the previous lecture we have discussed about the different seasons of the groundnut crop, and you have seen that it is mostly a Kharif season crop. 80% groundnut is grown during Kharif season in India, and remaining is grown in Rabi season, spring season as well as in summer season. So, basically there are 4 seasons, and now in Punjab they are growing groundnut during summer season also. So, as it suggests that during summer and Rabi season, you need irrigation. Assured irrigation has to be there, then you can grow this summer or Rabi season groundnut crop. Consumptive use of water and irrigation water requirement of the crop varies with the type of soils, season, climate conditions, varieties and management levels. So, number of factors will affect the consumptive use of water or water requirement. These factors are, for example, type of soil. So, soils generally lighter soils will require more water compared to heavy texture soils. Similarly, season, the irrigation or water requirement will be more during summer season or spring season compared to the Kharif season, because in Kharif season you will get some rains. Climatic conditions here means if you get good rains, then there is no need for irrigation. In case of less rain, you need to apply water. Also, higher temperature for a longer period would invite application of more water. Varieties, long duration variety would require more water than the shorter duration variety, and of course management level. All these factors are going to affect the consumptive use of water, and students might be knowing what is consumptive use of water. It includes losses on account of evaporation, transpiration, etc. So, these are these make together your consumptive use of water. Due to these variations, irrigation water requirement varies from 400 to 700. Means under some condition you will need 400 millimeter water, under some condition you will need 700 millimeter water. And what are those conditions? Differing climate, differing varieties, differing soil and so on. On sandy loam soils of West Bengal, for example, consumptive use of water range from 442 to 674 millimeter under different irrigation schedule during summer season. So, here you need irrigation. Highest water use of 674 millimeter was recorded with a continuous 0.91 IWCP ratio. I think student might be knowing what is IWCP ratio. IW is irrigation water and CP is cumulative pan evaporation. So, IW is actually fixed, almost fixed. Suppose we want to apply this water depth about 5 centimeter irrigation water depth, then this will be 5 centimeter, and CP is cumulative pan evaporation. That unit you can also keep in centimeter, and also this constant is fixed. This is called as crop coefficient, and the value of crop coefficients are known to us. So, it will decide the time of irrigation actually, at what time we should apply the irrigation. So, 0.91 IW ratio. At Hyderabad and Dapoli, the irrigation water requirement of Rabi season groundnut was 500 to 600 millimeter. Summer season irrigation requirement of groundnut was found to vary from 550 to 600 millimeter at Bangalore and Dharwad. In Rabi and summer, you can see 6 to 8, 10 irrigations are required. Of course, the productivity of summer crop is good because clear weather, there is good light intensity as required by the groundnut crop, and also biotic stresses are less prominent during summer season compared to the Kharif season. So, therefore, the productivity is of course high, but irrigation requirement is also high during summer season groundnut crop. In sandy loam soils, irrigate the crop at 25% depletion of available soil moisture for getting a higher yield. Now, what is this 25% depletion of available soil moisture? You might be knowing that available water ranges between field capacity and permanent wilting point. So, what amount of water is available between these two limits is actually available water, and this 25% is 25% of that available water. So, at that stage we can apply water when 25% of the available water has depleted. When water sources are limited, irrigation should be scheduled at 50% depletion of water. Means if your sources are limited, if you do not have facilities for irrigation, kind of a stress condition, then instead of 25% depletion of water, we can go for 50% depletion of water, means giving little stress to the crop during early stages. This 50% depletion during early stages up to 50 days after sowing. But later on you need to increase the supply of the water. Then you need to apply irrigation at 25% depletion of available soil moisture thereafter during pod development stage. That means pod development stage and grain filling stage are very important, and we should increase the water supply. So here only after 25% depletion of available soil moisture, we should apply irrigation. While scheduling irrigation based on IWCP ratio, irrigate the crop at 0.1 IWCP ratio. So this is the ratio during the early stages of growth, say up to 50 days after sowing. But afterwards, when the reproductive stage starts and pod formation, pod development start, we should have 0.75 IWCP ratio, means apply irrigation at 0.75 IWCP ratio during reproductive stage. So overall, what you are seeing here is that plant can tolerate up to some level water stress during vegetative growth, but it should not be allowed to tolerate water stress during reproductive stage. Otherwise, there may be severe loss in the yield. Under limited water conditions of Bangalore, irrigation at 0.5 IWCP ratio during 10 to 40 days and at 0.75 IWCP ratio during later stage was at par with the scheduling irrigation at 0.75 IWCP throughout the cropping season. Quite interesting results. So you can see here that you can go for giving little water stress during vegetative stage. There is no advantage of scheduling irrigation at 0.75 IWCP ratio during the vegetative stage. But at reproductive stage, it has to be 0.75 IWCP ratio for realizing better seed yield of groundnut crop. At Parvani, irrigation schedule at 40 and 80 mm CP increased the pod yield significantly over 120 millimeter CP. So there are number of approaches for scheduling the irrigation. It can be weather based parameters, and it can be IWCP ratio, or it can be even critical growth stages of the crop. So number of options are available. It can also be tensiometers, or we can measure the moisture level by gypsum block, etc. So irrigation can also be scheduled on the basis of the critical stages. The important growth period of groundnut are establishment 10 to 20 days after sowing, vegetative stage normally 25 to 35 days after sowing, flowering and pegging 35 to 50 days after sowing. This is most critical stage, and then pod formation 50 to 75 days, pod development 75 to 90 days. So these are very general values of the duration, and these are actually the growth stages of the groundnut crop. The flowering and pegging stages are the most sensitive, you can say, sensitive to water deficit, followed by the pod formation period. So you can see the reproductive stage is really very critical for irrigation. So what is critical stage? Means the stage when you do not apply water, and whenever there is shortage of water, there will be maximum reduction in the yield. That particular stage is called as critical stage. The early part of the pod formation period is particularly sensitive to the water deficit. At Kalyani, 3 irrigations at flower initiation, pod formation and pod development stages recorded significantly higher yields than 1 and 2 irrigations. So you can see these are very critical stages for irrigation: flower initiation, pod initiation and pod development stages. Saving irrigation water to the tune of 30 to 40% can be achieved by shifting from surface to sprinkler method. Another way is to, if we want to improve the water use efficiency, then we can shift to the method of irrigation. Normally we go for border irrigation, check basin irrigation or other surface irrigation. But if we go for sprinkler or say micro irrigation kind of system, then we can improve the water use efficiency. So, total water use in the surface method is 48.2 centimeter, but if you go for sprinkler irrigation, the water is just 38.7 centimeter. So, we can reduce the water requirement. While the yield of groundnut pods under sprinkler irrigation was 18.88% higher than the yield obtained under surface irrigation. So, yield is also more. There may be some negative effect of surface irrigation like leaching of nutrients, etc. Now, after water management, the last part of this lecture is weed management, and definitely weeds compete with the crop plant for space, for light, for nutrients, for water, for any kind of resources. There is competition between the weeds and the crop, and first initial say 20 to 40 days are very critical for weed growth. Competition is very tough during this period. So, we should not have any weeds during this period. So, weeds cause enormous yield loss, can be 30 to 70% in groundnut owing to their slow initial growth of the crop. The yield losses are more in the bunch type than in spreading type. So, spreading types covers ground more, so it can have depressing effect on the weed growth. Prominent grassy weeds or monocot weeds, or they are also called narrow-leaved weeds, are Echinocloa cruzgelli, Echinocloa colonum, Cynodon dactylon, Digitaria, Alucine, Egypticum and Dactyloractinium egypticum. Broadleaf weeds are Brachiria, Sancrus, Tribulus, Tephrosia, Celosia argentea, Comelina bengalensis, Digeria arvensis, Euphorbia hita, Phyllanthus neruri, Trianthema monogyna, and sages, Cyprus compressus, and then you can see Cyprus rotundus, Cyprus iria, etc. Number of weeds are there. So, this is Dactyloractinium egyptium, grassy weed, again Brachiria ramosa, grassy weed, Digitaria sangularis, Echinocloa colonna, Comelina bengalensis, Trianthema portula castrum, Celosia argentea, Cyprus rotundus. So, for effective control of weeds and to keep the soil loose for pegging, 2 hoeings or weeding are essential, and they can be done at 20 to 25 days after sowing and 40 days after sowing. No weeding or hoeing should be done at the pegging stage. It is harmful, and earthing up should be combined with the hoeing operation, and in view of the labor scarcity, we can go for the use of herbicide, particularly pre-emergence herbicide could be useful, like pendimethalin 1 kg AI per hectare can be used, and followed by intercultural operation at 30 and 45 days after sowing. And variety differ, we can take good varieties that compete with the weeds, and spreading type like K71-1 has been found very effective in suppressing the weed growth. So, we can adopt the integrated approach of intercultural operations or hoeing plus pendimethalin, or there can be some other herbicide alternatives also. Dear student, hope you enjoyed this lecture. Thank you very much.